This week's episode starts off right where last week's episode ended, with Juliet following the blood trail that I think belongs to Solo. And to me, the most interesting thing about this scene, besides the fact that Juliet was still suffering from decompression sickness, aka the bends, which is a nice callback to what Solo was explaining to her last episode about coming out of the water so fast, because we saw last week's episode, Juliet's fight or flight reaction kicked in and she swam out of there fast as hell, which explains her ears ringing and the cramp she's getting. But that's not the interesting part to me. The more interesting part to me is what she found when she went up there. She got shot by an arrow. Not only did she get shot by an arrow, this week's episode also showed us that it's more than one person living in this silo along with Solo. It's a group of young children. We know from Bernard that the revolution in Silo 17 happened over 25 years ago. And none of these characters here look over 25. They look to be children of the former inhabitants of this silo. But more specifically, I think they're children of the people who used to be inside of the vault. The same bodies that we saw outside of the door that Juliet mentioned to Solo, and he kind of just dismissed. Solo's paranoia now starts to make sense more than ever. What even more solidifies the fact to me that they're young, besides how they look, is how inexperienced they are. Because Juliet, even after getting shot by an arrow, was beating that kid down had the other two not come down. But the way Juliet was moving made me think of something very interesting that Bernard said this episode. Because the information that Bernard gave Lucas this episode, we found out that the silo has been suppressing people's memory using the water. We're gonna dive into Lucas and Bernard's conversation a little later in the video, but let's focus on that one key term. They were using the water, and now Silo 17 is flooding. It made me wonder, was Juliet really suffering from decompression sickness, or was it the effects of the water, which is why the judicial of Silo 17 tried to flood their silo in the first place, to spread this memory loss water? I know Juliet wasn't in the water for too long, but she was in there long enough to maybe forget about the pain that she was feeling, which is why she overpowered that kid. Maybe that's just my conspiracy theory brain, but now that I know that's an option, my mind is racing with all sorts of possibilities. And guys, if you're really feeling this season of Silo, don't forget to click that subscribe button. Let's get back to the three kids and try to figure out exactly who they are. On first appearance, they all seem to have different ethnicities. Because the way the silo set up, that's not a big deal. They can still be siblings. Ethnicity doesn't play a major role on who's partnered with who. One of these characters are siblings or family members, and their parents were the ones that were inside the vault and they all used to live in there. And because they were children, it would make sense that the parents never gave them the code to the silo. But when Solo deciphered that code and he got in there, he killed the parents that were there and stole the silo as well as the supplies. And now it makes me wonder, how long has Solo been here? Because Solo has not been inside this vault for 25 years, simply because these kids could not have survived outside of the vault for 25 years without food. We know without power, the silo can't generate its own food. However, the IT department does have its own way of generating food. That's what Bernard told Lucas last episode. So maybe these children are only out for a few years with the meager supplies that they had left. But obviously it couldn't have been the full 25 years because there's just no way they had enough food to survive that long. I don't think these kids are dangerous. I only think that they have a beef with Solo because Solo killed their parents, which could play in Juliet's favor because they didn't kill her. They actually look like they're gonna have a conversation next episode. Maybe Juliet and them can come to an accord and put their heads together because they have one common enemy, if we're being honest, and that's Solo. The only thing Juliet needs from Solo is her suit that he locked inside the vault, which is the same thing that these kids need from Solo, access to the vault, and maybe revenge for killing their parents. But I think more importantly, it would be access to the vault and the supplies that are in there, which shows one of the biggest issues with IT as a whole, the consolidation of power, which brings us to Lucas and Salvatore Quinn's message. The legend of Salvatore Quinn has two different explanations. We have the explanation that Bernard gives Lucas about Salvatore Quinn saving the silo by destroying all the books before the before times and wiping everyone's memory. But we also have the description of Salvatore Quinn as a traitor, which is the reason why his family changed their last name in the first place, to disassociate themselves with his legacy. So let's unpack exactly what Salvatore Quinn did. Salvatore Quinn brought a lasting peace to Silo 18 that lasted 140 years. The way he did this and the way he was able to suppress all this rebellion was by destroying all the books from the before times, wiping human mind and history about the stories of the before time, and consolidating all that knowledge into the IT department. When you contrast that with Silo 17, they had all their knowledge. They still had knowledge of the outside world. They still understood the concepts, which now starts to add sense why Solo knows so much things. which is also why his story of Romeo and Juliet is vastly different from Juliet's story on Silo 17. And that's because Juliet's silo doesn't have the correct information. Actually, they don't have any information about the before times. While Solo's silo, which eventually had a rebellion that was successful, had all the knowledge of the before times. And now more things start to compute when we look at Solo as a character, because Solo doesn't seem all that smart for him to be the head of IT. He looks to be a crook who stole the position, and the reason he has so much knowledge of the before times is because his silo never suppressed the information like Silo 18's did. We first got hint of this memory suppression drug back in season 1 when it came to Gloria, but Sims also mentioned the ability to wipe memory to Patrick Kennedy this season, so the breadcrumbs for this revelation have been laid since the first season. It was even picked up some more this season, which makes a lot more sense now why Silo 18 is so blind to understanding just anything. I believe the truth of the matter is Salvatore Quinn did not burn the books and wipe out all the knowledge. I think it was the work of his shadow and he got overthrown. And essentially Judicial made that decision without him, which is why he created the message and passed it down in a relic. Why else would the first part of the message that Lucas deciphered read, "If you've gotten this far, you know the game is rigged"? That is Salvatore Quinn's original message, saying that the game itself, whatever it's happening in the silo, is a sham. But the way Bernard talks about Salvatore is as though he created this sham, unless Salvatore Quinn's delusional, and I don't think that's the case. Based on my analysis and the emphasis on shadows this season, such as Solo claiming to be the shadow of IT, as well as Lucas and Sims earlier maneuvering to be Bernard's shadow, I think in Salvatore Quinn's case, it is his shadow betraying him, which is kind of a reflection of what's going to happen, I think, this season when it comes to Lucas. Because we see Sims approach Lucas and he gave him a nice proposition. Work for me and I'll support you as the shadow instead of working for Bernard. Now we see the fruits of all of Bernard's actions starting to come to reap. All the maneuvering he's been doing all season, pushing everyone away. Sims told him he had more contacts than him. That's why he got the information from Amundsen, which made him able to talk to Lucas. And we even see Lucas's methodology after speaking to Quinn's descendants. The way he goes about getting information is vastly different from Bernard's. Everyone so far is moving differently from Bernard, even Billings, because even though Shirley is still trying to recruit Billings to join the revolution, he's still on the side of the pact and he refuses to betray the law. Again, like I said, it's honorable, but at this point, everything's falling against Bernard. Even though Billings isn't working directly with the rebellion, he's against Bernard. And now that his wife's involved, the fact that Patrick Kennedy told her about the book, and when she talked to Billings about it, he showed it to her, they all have a longing to go outside, that longing to be more. Remember, he's no longer feeling the syndrome because of that longing. Judge Meadows told us earlier this season, the syndrome is nothing but a psychosynaptic reaction to living underground, and humans are not meant to live underground, which is going to push Billings against Bernard. We already see Sims moving against Bernard, and now that they're starting to get Lucas's ear, along with Mechanical pushing against Bernard, the only thing he has up his sleeve is Walker. And I have to say, this episode, I'm severely disappointed in Walker because she betrayed the rebellion. She betrayed Knox and Shirley and her group because of her love for McLean, which I understand, love is love, but at the same time, you're undermining the entirety of the operation. And you see how much of a slimeball Bernard is. He only let Walker see McLean for a second, dangling the fruit in front of her, but keeping her in his back pocket. And boom, just like that, Bernard finally got his first win in, 5 episodes? By catching the rebels that are trying to steal more supplies. The real question is, now with 2 episodes left and Juliet dealing with these new characters, will she get back in time to warn her silo? Because now everything is at a boiling point. Everything and everyone is turning against Bernard. And what's interesting to me is what happens to Silo 18 if they overthrow Bernard. I think, and I've thought this all season, that there's a way for the silos to communicate. The fact that they both have advanced computers in the IT department and Lucas is now the shadow of IT, if they're able to overthrow Bernard, would Juliet be able to reach out to Lucas and stop them from going outside before it's too late? I don't know, but what I do know is the only one stopping everyone from coming out of this alive is Solo. He has the code to the IT vault. Juliet needs it. Those kids who attacked him needs it. We don't even know if Solo's alive yet, but I have a strong feeling that they haven't killed him yet. Or if they killed him without getting inside the vault, they kind of doomed everybody because they're going to run out of food and supplies. The water levels are no longer rising, but there's no way for them to live properly without electricity, and the only place that has electricity is the IT vault. Juliet needs her suit, And there may be a way for these two supercomputers of Silo 17 and Silo 18 to communicate, but that's just my thoughts on it. I'd love to hear your thoughts about Silo episode 8 in the comment section below. And if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and until next time, peace.